All right, my friends. How am I coming in voice? Started a little bit early to get through any kinks that might arise. Very good. Thank you very much for that audio check, Demi. Are the birds distracting? That's because I have the windows open in my room. Does it make a nice background sound? Yeah. Good evening, Bhante. Do we have somebody joining us from Europe or Asia? Ah, I have an online community, and at one time we had a lot of Australians on there with us, and so we would develop. We developed our own little things instead of saying good morning or good day or good evening. We decided that we created Dave, so we would say good Dave, day and eve together. So this way it covers everybody, no matter where they are in the world. Good Dave or Dave. All right, so I think we are ready to get started here. It is 8:01, at least on my end of the world. Okay, so yeah, good Dave, y'all. Okay, my friends. So we have scheduled this morning the typical guided meditation, Dhamma talk, and Q&A. And what I wanted to do normally, if the topic is not necessarily connected to a specific meditation, we'll do the meditation first. But since this topic is connected to a specific meditation we're going to do, I want to give the talk first. So we'll talk for a little bit first, then we'll do the guided meditation, and then we'll do the Q&A after that. So mindfulness of death, awareness of death. I'm going to post a few links in the chat as I go along. But I wanted to first just kind of address this topic. This is a topic that you hear different teachers and different traditions have different views on, whether this kind of a topic is only for monastics or not for lay people or these kind of things. And it's very clear, from, as I'm going to point out, from the early Buddhist texts, that the Buddha actually wants all of us to practice this contemplation, right? And as you'll see, it's going to, at least for one of my favorite things in Buddhism called the 5 subjects for contemplation, the Buddha says that this is for women or men, lay or ordained. So it means nobody's exempt from this. Everybody, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, you should reflect on these 5 things, right? So what I'm going to start with is the story of the Buddha. Most of you are probably familiar with the the mythology of the Buddha, that he was hidden away, and he wanted to go out and kind of experience the world, to see his people and all these kind of things. And so the Buddha had 4 visions or 4 sights. The first one was an old person. Second one was a sick person. Third one was a dead person. Fourth one was a bald-headed ascetic in robes, right? So he had these 4 visions. The bald-headed ascetic part is not too conducive to what we're going to talk about, but the first 3 are very important, right? He saw an old age, sickness, and death. Right? These are 3 things that spurred him into action, that spurred him into wanting to find a way to the ending of his suffering, right? These 3 things are what really started the quest. Right? The Buddha calls the quest for awakening the Arya Pariyesana, which means the noble quest, the noble search, right? These 3 things are what the Buddha calls the divine messengers. Why are they divine messengers? Because they point us to the truth. They point us to reality. Right? And as we know, right, if you're a meditator, you're a practitioner, most of us have lived most of our lives kind of avoiding truths, avoiding reality, right? Most of the time, we don't think about these things, right? Because they're uncomfortable. It's not a nice thing to contemplate that one day you're just gone. This body is done. This life is over, right? Or if you're young, it's not necessarily a nice thing to contemplate that if you live long enough, one day your eyesight's going to start to fail and you're going to, have aches and pains with every movement and all of these kind of things, right? It's not a pleasant thing for us to reflect on these things. But if we are following the noble quest, right? If we are following the Noble Eightfold Path, trying to do our best to follow in the footsteps of the Buddha and those who have become awakened, then this is part of that. Right? This is a mindfulness of death, awareness of death, however you want to say it, is a very important aspect of the path. Right? Most of you, if you've heard of mindfulness of death practices, you're probably familiar with 32 parts of the body, charnel ground contemplation, so contemplating the decay of a corpse and things like that. And these are very important practices, right? So they're so important that if you look up the Satipatthana Sutta, the Majjhima Nikaya number 10, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, those 2 practices are under mindfulness of body. Being aware of body, an aspect of the body in the body, however you want to translate it. So these practices are intricately woven into and part of the development of what we call vipassana, right? To see deeply, to see through, to see yata bhuta, things as they really are, right? So if you have, if you've never done any kind of mindfulness of death practices, right? Or if maybe you read the list of the 32 parts of the body: head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, sinew, all of these things, right? Or you contemplate the decay of a corpse. If you get, into these things, and we're not going to do those today. Since we have a short amount of time, I'm treating this more of an introductory than anything else. But when you get into that, right, and lots of kind of disgust and fear arises, right, that's normal, right? That's absolutely normal for us to have that kind of disgust and fear. And you know what the reason is? The reason is because you went your whole life without contemplating these things, without looking them straight in the eye. Right? That's a very important understanding. Right? And the more you do these practices, the more comfortable you become with reality. Actually, the more peaceful you become. And I'll give you an example. I've been practicing mindfulness death practices probably about 12 years now, somewhere's around there, at least 12 years. And at where I'm from, actually, I probably should give an introduction. I'm just assuming that most people know me, but my name is Bhante J. Bhikkhu Jayasāra, and I reside at Bhavana Society in West Virginia. And so even before I went there to become a monk, I went there for 3 years for retreats and things like that. And I do what most of us do when we live at Bhavana. We walk on the roads and, to get exercise, and we practice giving metta to everybody and these things, and cars drive by and we wave to them. And about a year and a half ago now, maybe, I started noticing out of nowhere, even though I'd been walking these roads for years, I started getting a fear when I would hear a car come up behind me. And I don't know where that came from. It was weird because it's like I said, I've been walking this road for years, many cars passing me, no fear arising. All of a sudden, every time I'd go for a walk, every car, fear. And one of the thing that I did was, when that fear was arising, the one time I said, you know what? This is the time to practice mindfulness of death practices. So I just did a simple reflection. And I said the words, my death is coming for me. Right? And of course, the average person that says, oh God, that sounds horrible. That's going to make you more anxious and more this and more that. But you know what happened? My fear went away and I was at peace. Because I had been practicing these things, and I had been facing the reality of this for so long that actually fear turned into peace. Right? So that's an important understanding of what these practices are for. Okay? And I want to go into two suttas that are literally, I'm not going to read them or anything. I'm just going to give them to you guys because they are important. They're literally called mindfulness of death. So those of you who are going to see this without the chat, just Google mindfulness of death suttas. You can use like Sutta Central, these kind of things. And Anguttara Nikaya number 6.19 and 6.20. Again, I'm not going to read them. We don't have time for that, but I'm just going to summarize them and give the salient points here. All right. So in the first one, 19, it's a funny sutta. So the Buddha starts out, it says, bhikkhus, develop mindfulness of death. Developing mindfulness of death leads to great fruit and great benefit. It leads on to the deathless, leads on to awakening. And so, when the Buddha says, develop this, all of a sudden, like the monks kind of get into this little, this little competition of, I develop mindfulness of death. And the Buddha says, how do you develop mindfulness of death? And the first monk says, at least every day and a night, I reflect and I follow the Buddha's teachings that this may be my last day, et cetera, all these things that we're going to go over a little bit in a couple minutes. And then, of course, there's a little bit of game of one-upsmanship. Another monk, how do you develop mindfulness of death? I develop mindfulness of death at least once a day. Okay? And then the next one, how do you develop mindfulness of death? I develop mindfulness of death, half a day. And then the next one, over the time it takes to eat a meal. Then the next one is over the time it takes to take 5 or 6 bites. And then the next one is over the time it takes to take 1 bite, to chew 1 morsel of food. And then the last one is over the time it takes to breathe in, having breathed out. Right? So they go into this little competition of, who practices mindfulness of death the most, the best. And the Buddha says that anybody who has been practicing mindfulness of death a day and a night down to the time it takes to take 1 meal is practicing heedlessly. So the Buddha is very kind of abrupt and straight. He's like, you're practicing very heedlessly, right? Mindlessly. You're not practicing mindfulness of death enough. And so he says, those who are practicing for the time it takes to take 1 morsel, to chew 1 morsel of food, or to breathe in, having breathed out, so half the breath cycle, those are practicing heedfully, mindfully. Right. So the Buddha is telling us here that this is something that we should be reflecting upon often. Right? And the second one, the AN 620, is the same. He starts out, develop mindfulness of death. It leads to great fruit and benefit, etc. And he says, this is how you should develop it. So when the day is past and the night comes, so like before you go to bed, you reflect on, I might not wake up, right? There are many ways that I may die. And he goes through a whole list, from scorpion bites to digestion that kills you, and, all these kind of things. So you reflect on all the different ways that you can die. And then and when you wake up in the morning, you reflect again, I may die today. This could be my last day, right? Many, many people, hundreds of people die in the world every day, right? Most of them probably didn't wake up thinking, this is going to be my last day, right? So we reflect that, okay, I may die today. There are many ways I may die, right? And so we come up to a good point here because, some people might think, well, what's the point of doing all this? Is it kind of be like to be morbid, to be, kind of depressed and always like, oh, we're going to die and all these things. And the next point in the sutta is very important, because the next part actually tells you what the purpose of these practices are. Hint, it's not about dying, it's about living. Because the Buddha says, if you reflect, is there anything that I have left undone? Is there any unskillful qualities and habits and activities that I do that upon death would lead to my detriment? That would lead to my suffering. And he says, when you reflect on your mind and you see that there are these things, then one should practice as if somebody whose head was on fire, right? So if your head's on fire, you're going to put a lot of effort and zeal to douse that fire out, right? So the Buddha says that's how one should practice. That's how one should live. Right? And if you observe and you see that there are no unskillful, unwholesome, harmful activities, habits, mindsets, etc., then you can abide peacefully, knowing that you live with this mind state. So this is the key to these practices, right? This is the key. It's not about being morbid and depressing yourself. It's about keeping you energetic and keeping you on track with understanding how you live, how your actions have impact, all of these kind of things, right? To practice like your head's on fire, right? Because you never know. Tomorrow, you could be gone. 5 hours from now, you could be gone, right? So you keep that. There's, in the common vernacular, in the popular culture, it's the concept of live like you were dying, right? Like, you don't know how much time you have. So you reflect, okay, what's the best thing for me to do with the time I have left? Right? And the Buddha gives there's a simile, there's a sutta called the simile of the mountains, where the Buddha is talking to a king. And the Buddha says, what would you do if you had your scouts came from all four corners and they said, great king, there are mountains as high as the sky coming in, crushing everything in their path. So the concept of you have mountains from all corners coming in to the center and crushing everything. And the king says, there would be nothing to do than to practice Dhamma, to practice skillfully, to practice developing the mind, to practicing abandoning unskillful, habits and mind states, and developing skillful habits and mind states. So practicing Dhamma. And so the Buddha says, I exhort you, great king. I tell you, old age, sickness, and death are coming in, crushing everything in their wake. What is there to do? Practice Dhamma. Right? So in the end, we see that these practices are for you in this very life, in the present life, right? These practices are for you to develop a sense of urgency, right? To develop this understanding that it is true that you could die even just today. Now, we don't think about that because we kind of expect, and statistically, there's a good chance that statistically, I'm 40, going to be 42 in a week or two. There's a good chance that I might live to at least 80, right? That's, 76, 77. That's life expectancy. So we kind of think, I'll worry about it when I get older. It's okay. But there's also a good chance, that something happens and I die today. I don't know. Right? So if you're mindful and you're aware and you face reality straight on with courage and determination, then you understand, I don't know. Life is uncertain. So let me do the best that I can with what I have, the time that I have, with what I have right here and now. And so the last couple of minutes of this talk, what I want to give you guys, and we're going to go, this is going to be a large part of our guided meditation, is the 5 subjects for contemplation. I'm going to put the link in here. And so this is also Anguttara Nikaya, but instead of 6, it's 5.57. So if you just literally, those of you who are listening, if you put in AN 5.57, Sutta Central or something like that in Google, you'll find it. These are pretty easy to find when you Google here. So this is, to me, one of the most impactful suttas, right? Because this is a core teaching of the Buddha. It's a core aspect of the Buddha's own path, old age, sickness, and death, right? So listen, so in this sutta, the Buddha says, whether you're a woman or a man, lay or ordained, i.e., so you, it doesn't matter, right? Whatever you are, whoever you are, wherever you live, whatever your job, it doesn't matter. This applies to all of us, right? So there's nobody exempt. So if you thought, like, I don't have to do these practices, these are for monks or whatever. Nah, this is for you. So the Buddha says, whether you're a woman or man, lay or ordained, etc., one should reflect on these often. And so we know from the first sutta, right, how much, when Buddha says often, we know what he means, right? So the first one is, I am subject to old age, to aging, to decay. I am not exempt from old age and decay, right? That's the first one. So you're reflecting, yeah, I'm subject to grow old, and the body to decay and the eyesight to start to go and all these things. Second is, I'm subject to illness and disease. I am not exempt from illness and disease. Third one is, I'm subject to death. I'm not exempt from death. So there's the divine messengers right there. Old age, sickness, and death. 3 directly visible and understandable aspects of life. All we have to do is courageously face them, to see that these are reality, right? The fourth one is often people's hardest, right? Because they'll say, oh, I'm not afraid of me dying, but I'm worried about, my spouse or my children or whatever dying. So the fourth one is, you will be separated from everything, so people, places, experiences, etc., that you hold dear, that you love. So that's a reflection that you're going to have this separation from all of these people, places, experiences, whatever that you love, you will be separated from them. And the fourth one, again, goes to the present moment, goes to this life here and now. I am the owner, the heir of my actions, right? I am responsible for my actions. Whatever I do, for good or ill, to that I shall be the heir, right? So it's reflecting, it's having these reflections. I'm going to get old. I'm going to get sick. I'm going to die. I'm going to have loss. So what do you do about it? Your actions matter, right? This is the main point, the main goal of these practices. Your actions here and now matter. And of course, to the Buddha, these actions matter just not only here and now. The results of these actions are not just to be seen in this life, but in future lives. So you have to understand that concept that when the Buddha tells you something, he's thinking about not only this life, but he's thinking about future lives. Because the Buddha, you'll see in many places where the Buddha essentially says, it would have been better if you died horribly right now than to do that action, because that action will cause more suffering in future lives, right? So we have to, when we, to fully understand where the Buddha is coming from, we have to kind of understand these things. But I think it also is understandable and also has the same impact in this life, right? Even if you don't believe there's nothing after, it still works in this life. So, so I think that's pretty much it. And, I do have a couple minutes. Good. So this is a good wrap up. So right now, right, we have this pandemic. We have people dying. One of the important things to reflect upon, right? I was kind of giving a little talk like this in one of my online communities. And I said something like, there's probably, I don't know, hundreds of people dying every day. So, and somebody actually Googled it up real quick and posted it in the chat. And it's something like over 100 people in the world die every minute, right? So we have, if you think about it, if you step back into this kind of global scale, we have 100 people dying every minute, and probably just about that much or a little more being born, right? So we have this cycle of people leaving this world and people entering this world. Okay? And so we don't think about these things, right? People, it's been common for people to bring up this stat, well, like 60,000 people in America die from the flu every year, right? So there's all these stats, all these people dying, right? We don't think about that, right? We only think about these kind of things when what happens? A pandemic, somebody, a loved one dies, right? Something happens, right? This is a divine messenger. What that means is that this is something that we can learn from, something that we can reflect on, right? When somebody is, going through taking care of a loved one with cancer, or somebody's going to lose a loved one, I always give them this recommendation. And this is something that I follow for myself. I've had plenty of death in my life, including very close people, and I've held the hand of people dying and all of these kind of things. And what I always say is, this is a lesson. This is a very valuable, rare experience, right? Don't let this go without really being mindful and really observing and being there and understanding what is going on, right? Because this is a divine messenger, a messenger from heaven, really. I mean, that's a messenger from the gods, however you want to say it. This is a divine messenger. This is reality showing us that we're not as, what would you call, protected. We're not in this, we kind of, especially in the modern first world, we kind of live in this bubble, right? We think that, the governments will be able to protect us and do everything for us. We think that, we're used to having electricity and all these services and everything. We live in this, we've developed this wonderful protection from the harshness of reality. So much to the point that we don't have to see, all of the things that even our ancestors had to see, right? And so we are kind of in this bubble, and every once in a while something comes along and pops it, and we have to deal with it, right? And when we haven't done these practices, and when we've avoided it most of our lives, then we're very fragile when it happens, right? But we can use these experiences, observing them mindfully, investigating and learning from them, to become, what's the new term, anti-fragile, right? To be able to be strong and courageous in any situation. That's also a side effect of these practices, right? When the situation happens, right? Think about doctors and nurses and all these people who deal with these kind of things on a regular basis, right? When there's an emergency, they get into action because they're used to it. They've been trained for it. They've practiced it. They've investigated it. They've done all of that thing. So they get into action, right? And that's the same thing with us. The more we practice these things, the more we understand these things, the more we come to terms with them, then when they happen, we don't fall apart. When they happen, we don't become useless, sniveling. Or one of a recent phrase in the last couple of years that I heard is like, be the person who doesn't fall apart at their father's funeral. And that really connected with me because, again, with my own experience, like, it is an amazing thing to be the person at a funeral of a close person who you can support them. Now, of course, you need your own support and to grieve and all that. I'm not saying anything that you don't do any of that, but you don't fall apart enough so that you can help others. You can be the strong shoulder to support other people, right? So that's a very important side effect to this, right? When we have this situation like this global pandemic and all these things, you can be strong and support yourself and be mentally okay, right? As much as we can. And when you're able to do that, right? You're able to help others as well. In whatever way, to be an ear, to talk to them, all of these kind of things. So this is an important aspect of these practices, that they make you anti-fragile, right? They allow you, we face reality. That's the main goal of a meditator is to see things as they are, to understand things as they are, not as we want them to be, not as we wish them to be, but as they are. So with that, friends, I think we're over time now. Yep. So let's get started with the guided meditation. And so during this guided meditation, right, especially if you haven't done these things before, you might have very strong emotions that occur, very strong reactions that occur, and that's okay. Like if anytime you need to stop the guided meditation to get up, to walk away, whatever, it's okay, right? There's no problem in that. But, have the courage to tomorrow or sometime in the future to go back to it, right? Gradually acclimating yourself to these practices. And again, we're not going deep here. We're not going to do but mindfulness of, the body parts and all that stuff. We're going to do just a very basic awareness. This is the best place to start, I think, is with these 5 subjects of contemplation. That's always the best place to start. It's the best ways to ease your way in to these practices. So let's begin our guided meditation. Close your eyes. And starting out, adjust your posture as you feel it's needed to bring your body into a comfortable and stable position. Take some time to adjust your body now, whether sitting on a cushion or a chair. And whenever you're ready, setting up your body, take 3 deep silent breaths. And then let the breath go and follow the breath. When we follow the breath in meditation, we don't want to try and manipulate or control it in any way. This body has been breathing since the moment you were born and will continue to do so until the second you die. It doesn't need you to do its job. Your job is to simply follow the breath and investigate it, like a scientist investigating something under a microscope. You may feel most prominently the breath at the nostrils, with the air going in and out of your nose. If so, you can place your awareness there. If not, that's okay. You may feel most prominently the rise and fall of the chest. You can place your awareness there. Or you can simply abide with the basic awareness of this body breathing in and breathing out. As you're following your breath, you will get distracted, taken away from your breath, your mind going here and there, across the world or the universe, to the past and the future. That's okay. You didn't fail or do something wrong. It's simply the mind showing you how it is, showing you its craving. You are starting to see things as they are. When the mind is done being distracted, when you've come back to awareness that you've been taken away from your breath, simply acknowledge that you've become distracted. Practice letting go and return to the breath. By letting go, we don't mean that you forcibly try to push yourself away from it and come back to the breath. Nor do we mean that you get attached to the thought or the distraction and you get more involved in it. It simply means to not give it any energy, not to become attached or averse to it. Simply to let it go. And when you do so, you'll see that things arise, they persist for a time, and then they go on their own accord. All while you sit and follow the breath. Continue to follow the breath while I give some brief instructions on this guided meditation. During this guided meditation, we will use both words and some visuals will be offered. The words and the visuals are just a means to an end. They are a training to help you to come to terms with these realities, to see these divine messengers for what they are, and to understand things as they are. You can repeat these things in your own words. You can use the visuals or not. But what will be presented is just a very basic framework. So repeat these words after me, silently, in your mind or in your home. I am subject to old age and decay. I am not exempt from old age and decay. Reflect on the fact that you will grow older. If you'd like, you can visualize your skin becoming wrinkled, your hair going gray. Needing to use various canes and walkers. Whatever you'd like to do to reflect on this basic fact that the body moves to decay. Now reflect on, not only do you get old, not only are you subject to aging and decay, but all beings, family and friends, all humans everywhere, animals, trees, everything ages, decays. Repeat. I am subject to illness and disease. I am not exempt from illness and disease. You can reflect on, because we have this body is susceptible to all kinds of illnesses. The common cold, the flu, viruses, cancer, illnesses that are a small bother, and illnesses that can lead to your death. If you'd like to visualize, you can visualize yourself in a hospital bed, right? Or sick in bed at home. It is the nature of this body to be sick. Reflect on the fact that not only you are subject to illness and disease, but all humans, family, friends, people across the world, all animals, beings, even the trees. So you walk the forest, you can see trees with big tumors, different illnesses. Repeat these words. I am subject to death. I am not exempt from death. Reflect on the fact that there are many ways that you could die. In the next 10 minutes, 10 years, or in decades. If you'd like a visual, you can visualize yourself in a coffin, or simply a gravestone, or a funeral pyre. Life is full of uncertainty, but death is certain. Reflect that all beings that are alive lead towards death. Family and friends, humans around the world, animals, trees, even planets, suns, galaxies, and the universe itself. All one day will cease. Repeat the words. I will be separated from everything that I hold dear. You will be separated from family and friends. You will be separated from places that you love, experiences. You are not exempt from this. Even if you were to be with your spouse for 50 or 60 years, eventually there will be separation. And you will feel that there was not enough time. Not only are you subject to these, separation, but all beings are subject to this separation. All beings will be separated from what they love. And repeat, I am the owner and heir of my actions. I am responsible for my actions. Whatever I do, good or bad, to that I shall be the heir. Reflect on understanding these previous 5 facts, knowing that you will grow old, get sick, and die, along with all beings, that your actions matter, both to you and others. Whatever you do, however you act, that is your relative, and you will be the heir of those actions. Not only are you subject and responsible for your actions, but all beings are heirs to their actions. Reflecting on these 5 facts, knowing that you are subject to old age, sickness, death, loss, that all beings are subject to these things, and all beings are owners of their actions. It behooves us to practice metta, limitless goodwill for all beings. So we're all in the same boat. All of us are subject to these things. So what is the point of anger and hatred? Let us practice goodwill and start with ourselves. You can repeat these words. May I find happiness. May I find peace. May I live in friendship with all beings. May I find release from suffering. When we say these words, they're not meant to be a mantra, something that we simply repeat over and over, but something that when we say the words, we honestly and sincerely give this wish and hope. If you like, you can visualize a sphere surrounding you. And within that sphere, you permeate your limitless goodwill, loving kindness, loving friendliness for all beings. You are in the center of that sphere. We never forget metta for ourselves, because you are part of all beings. Spread your sphere to encompass the entirety of whatever building you're in. Repeat, may all of us in this building find happiness. May we find peace. May I live in friendship with all beings. May all of us find release from suffering. Spread your sphere to encompass the entirety of your town. May all of us in this town find happiness. May all of us find peace. May all of us live in friendship with each other. May all of us find release from suffering. Spread your sphere to encompass all beings in your state. May all of us in this state find happiness. May all of us find peace. May all of us live in friendship with each other. May all of us find release from suffering. Spread your sphere to encompass the entirety of the earth. May all of us on this earth, human, non-human, big, small, seen or unseen, without any exceptions, people we like, people we don't like, no exceptions. Metta breaks through barriers. Sex doesn't matter, race, political affiliation, religion, sports team, whatever ways that we classify ourselves. Metta is limitless, so we never forget anybody. So all of us on this planet Earth find happiness. May all of us find peace. May all of us live in friendship with each other. May all of us find release from suffering. Spread your sphere of metta out into the universe, encompassing our Milky Way galaxy and beyond. Our limitless goodwill for all beings, anywhere, in all of existence. May all of us that exist in any place, in any time, May all of us find happiness. May all of us find peace. May all of us live in friendship with each other. May all of us find release from suffering. Slowly begin to come back to the earth, to your body. And slowly open your eyes and come back to an awareness of everything going on around you. And we can end our guided meditation. I left my phone over there, so I can't give you the insight timer bell. No bell this morning. So we'll start the Q&A now. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat, and I'll read them and answer them for as much time as we have. One thing that I do want to point out, I didn't tell you that we were going to do metta at the end of the mindfulness of death guided meditation, but it is something that I highly suggest. I think it flows very easily, and it's something that, most of the time, like when I'm at bhavana, I'll do, pretty much every time I sit, I do walking meditation, sitting meditation, mindfulness of death, and metta. And I'll go in front of the skeleton hanging, in front of the meditation hall, and I'll do my mindfulness of death. And it really flows right nicely into it. We're reflecting, all of us, no matter what, we have old age, sickness, death, right? So why waste time on things like hate and all these kind of things? It just flows so nicely right into metta. And then even if you've had like very kind of fears and uncomfortable feelings doing the mindfulness of death, the metta can release that. So it's a very good, I think, in my own practice is what I do. And I suggest that, especially if mindfulness of death is a little rough for you, ending it with metta, understanding that all of us are subject to these things, and all of us, deserve our limitless goodwill, is a very good way to end this. Just checking to see if there's any questions. Doesn't look like it. That can happen, right? After you've gone through a very deep, something like mindfulness of death, you're kind of in this like shock, just kind of like in this contemplative. It's normal. Anytime there's a tough situation, it takes a while to process it. It takes a while to integrate it and to move forward, having had it be an experience that you learned and grew from, right? This is an important thing. Yeah, so I highly suggest that anybody can do these practices. Even the deeper stuff like contemplating the body, 32 parts of the body, and the charnel ground contemplation, contemplating your body decaying and all these things. That can be rougher, but eventually it's something important to get to do. It's important to start. And you can start with the 5 subjects of contemplation. To me, that's the best place to start any kind of awareness of death, mindfulness of death, because these are so key in the whole of the Buddha's practice, the whole of the Buddha's teachings. These are very, very key. These subjects for contemplation, these divine messengers. Right? Kevin says, thank you. Excellent. Quick question. With the one about I will be sick, is there any thought on the power of belief with that? Do you mean like the power of making yourself sick? I'm not exactly sure the correlation or what you like me to answer. If Kevin, if you could clarify that, I'll answer that. Does Bhante have any? Okay. So Kevin, oh, the chat's moving a little bit fast here. So I'm going to back up a bit. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that Kevin, that I don't necessarily worry about the danger of making yourself sick from reflecting on that you'll be sick. Um, I mean that the mind is very powerful, but I don't know if that would that would mean like you can give yourself some kind of major illness or something like that. Maybe you can make yourself throw up or something. But I don't necessarily, I wouldn't worry that as a danger per se. But each person is different. Each person's, their own mind, their own body, their own experience. And that's something that they would have to be very mindful of and be aware and take measures. How do you strengthen our mindfulness of death practice? Jones asks, this is my first time. I found it hard to visualize and experience deep feelings. You just practice it. That's how, I mean, you have to do, if you want to get deeply into it, integrate it into part of your daily practice. All right. Like I said, what I tend to do, like if I have an hour block, what I'll tend to do is I'll do walking meditation for 20 minutes, somewhere's around there. Then I would go out to the skeleton and I'll do 10 minutes. I gave you guys this kind of very drawn out guided meditation, but as you practice it and develop your own kind of rhythm, this took me 10 minutes guided 10 minutes of mindfulness of death and then into metta. So it gets quicker. So I might do it kind of very slow and drawn out as I do it because it's a training guided meditation. So I'd go out and I'd go hang out with the skeleton for 10 minutes, practice my mindfulness of death. Having a hanging skeleton is very beneficial because you can reflect, well, okay, this is, I have this bone, right? And one day my body will be like this, just a skeleton, and it'll decay and all these kind of things. And then I do metta, and then I go and I sit down. And I find that after doing walking meditation and mindfulness of death and metta, by the time I go to sit down, like I'm not fighting with my mind. My mind's very calm and quiet and clear, and my sitting is just very easy to just sit and have a very good, mindfulness of breath session. So it takes time. It takes practice to start out just a little bit of day. Even if you start out just every day, maybe make it a thing when you wake up, reflect on the 5 subjects of contemplation. When you go to bed, reflect on the 5 subjects of contemplation. That's a very small, simple thing. A tool that the Buddha gives. This is the Buddha giving us a tool for practice. Here, reflect on these things often, right? So you start that, if you make that a habit, that will start your awareness to reflect on these things, to understand these things. And, it's interesting because I hesitate almost to say that, but so like when you practice these things, when you become close with death and all these things, when something like this pandemic happens, you just don't freak out about it. It's like, okay, people are going to die, and these things happen, and we're going to try to do our best to, mitigate, making this worse, and making, all these kind of, so you may take measures towards it, but you're not like, oh my God, everything, because you've practiced and you reflect, okay, this is life. This is, this is part of life. And so it makes it easier for you to understand and to deal with situations like what's happening in the world now. If someone is taking care of a very sick pet that is terminally ill, how does a person going to decide when to stop the supportive treatment and let the pet die naturally? That's a tough question. I can never, I can't really support any kind of like a euthanasia. I can't, I could never support and say, yeah, at one point you have to kill the animal. It's not something that is, approved of per se, a reflection of that. At least from my end, I can't support something like that to euthanize the animal, even understanding, that, the understanding of your ending its pain and stuff like that. So that's something that you have to kind of come to your own decision on. You have to feel it. Like I think, I don't know the validity of this, but Ajahn Brahm does the thing where like you sit with your pet and really kind of ask it in your mind, if it's ready to go and all these kind of things. I mean, this might be something to do. I don't know. But I think that's something that you have to reflect on, to think about all the different, to think about all the different sides, all the different views and understandings of this, and go with your intuition, really. I mean, there's no, your karma is yours, and, life is not black and white. Life is not easy. And sometimes we have to make hard decisions. I can't really go into it deeper than that. It's up to you in the end, and you have to search yourself and reflect and contemplate and see what your decision is. Oh, okay. Never mind. I didn't see this at the end. Let the pet die naturally. That's it's an interesting thing, because what I would say is, if the animal is just surviving on medications, like the medication is literally keeping it alive, it's kind of one of those things where you have to make the decision is that's a tough question. It's like, you have to make the decision. Well, do I just let it die naturally? How long am I keeping this animal around for me and for it, right? Like how much of it is because of you, right? Like even with humans, like, I tell you, like I had a wife when I was younger, and she died of cancer and all these kind of things. And so I know this kind of, and she was on intubation, and, the question was like, well, how long do we just keep her on intubation? Do we just let her die? All these kind of things. And different people had different views. I think some people were ready to let it go, and other people were not. So it's something that you have to reflect on and make the decision yourself. Kevin, understand that we're subject to illness. It's inevitable, but my experience has shown that my belief in health seems to have an important role. There's no problem with, believing in health and believing in keeping yourself healthy and all of these kind of things. There's no problem in that. Trying to live a healthy lifestyle, whatever, your body is considered healthy. All these kind of things, that's a very good thing. You got to think in that case, you have to think of it as, you have this machine, right? You were born, you have this body, and this being born in this body, especially as a human, and all these things, and the ability to hear Dhamma over the internet and all these kind of things. This is a gift, right? You've done very good things in past lives to become a human, to learn Dhamma, right? So of course you want to maintain it and keep it healthy and do all that you can do to have the best chances of living a long life, to be able to practice Dhamma and hear Dhamma more. Right. So it's not about like, just, I'm just going to let my body, whatever. And no, you take care of your body and you keep it healthy and all of these things. But you also have to reflect on the fact that no matter how healthy you do, no matter how, no matter how you try to do anything, there could be some kind of hidden defect and you have an aneurysm and boom, you're done. You just die. You're playing basketball, boom, and you're done. Right. So that's more what this is about. This is reflecting on that, that you're subject to this. We can try to do whatever we can to minimize it, to mitigate it, to push it to a further, years down the road, but it's still going to happen and you're still subject to it. That doesn't mean that you don't take care of yourself and maintain this body well. As a matter of fact, it's one of the monastic reflections is that we maintain the body so that we can live the holy life, that we can practice the Dhamma towards awakening. Sarah, how would you describe a hardcore death meditation as opposed to the gentle intro for those practitioners to recollect death regularly with pleasant experiences? I don't know if I would say hardcore per se, but no, if you were to, so my full mindfulness of death practice starts out with the 5 subjects of contemplation, but it goes, and it starts out with reflecting like there are many ways I could die today. And I do I'll add that obviously modern days, there's no scorpions where I live. So scorpions aren't necessarily going to kill me, but you never know. So I add things like I could be hit by a car today. I could, whatever, there's all kinds of things. So I add all of these practices into one practice. And I go into there's parts of this body and, that because I have this body, I'm subject to these 5 things, these 5 facts. And then I go into reflecting on, how, so there's this wonderful reflection of you kind of visualize yourself, in front of yourself, and then you just visualize it becoming old and then it dies. Right, and it falls down. And then I visualize as that body literally decays, right? And the Buddha goes through this thing and just decay. First it bloats up. If you ever seen a dead body after a couple of days, all the water comes out. So it bloats up and, it gets into these disgusting things, or at least disgusting for people who aren't reflecting on it. If you look up body farms and stuff like that, you can go online and see all kinds of, there's a wonderful documentary called A Certain Kind of Death, where, they don't pull any punches. You see the bodies and all kinds of stuff. It's amazing. And so you acclimate yourself to these realities that this is this is what the body does. Right. So it can be quite harsh to just jump right into that for some people. So I have to what I do is I, kind of start out with the 5 subjects of contemplation and you build from that. I do with Buddhist Insights, the last 3 years, I do a mindfulness of death retreat. Some of you on this chat have been to that retreat. And I start out with the 5 subjects of contemplation and we build on from there. Right. So that would be the full practice, the full contemplation of being able to do the body part and the body decay, the full practice. And of course, always reflecting on that this is subject, everybody, every being is subject to these things, not just you. But again, even if you do whatever practices you do in the beginning, you will have that fear. You will have that aversion, that disgust. The parts of the body and all these kind of things. And some of us have a little bit of a leg up on that. And some of us, it's more disgusting. As a 13-year-old, I kind of remember, eating my lunch and watching Operations on Discovery Channel Health. So, there's certain things that some people are disgusted by and others not. I'm kind of disgusted more about cat hair than I am about open bodies and things like that. It's just one of those things. We're all different in that regard. All right. Sally says, how to overcome fear of separation from Dhamma. Separating from like not being able to hear the Dhamma, Sally? I'm not, or are you separation, like just separation from people, places, and things? You know, if it's separation from the Dhamma, you just have to, this is another thing. This is urgency, right? Okay, well, there might come a time, listen, there might be a solar flare, right? That, don't get, in the past, I was really big onto like things that can kill us all, like apocalyptic kind of things, solar flares and asteroids and things like that. So there could be a solar flare that comes in and fries all electricity on the whole planet. Right? And then you never get to log on to Buddhist insights and listen to Dhamma again. It can happen. Well, what can you do? You can remember what the Dhamma that you have, what you've learned, you practice what you remember. Even if you can't hear other people talk Dhamma, you practice and you learn now, and it's always with you. That's one of the great things about memorizing. Like Westerners, we kind of think, well, what's the point of all this memorization? The Buddha says, of course, in the early days, it was because it's an oral tradition, nothing's written down, but also it's because the Dhamma is always there. You can always bring up, what was that? Oh, it's in my head. All right. So memorization is a very good thing, no matter, even if you're a monk or not a monk, it doesn't matter. Whatever Dhamma that, suttas and Dhamma that you really find very impactful, you memorize it and keep it in your mind and reflect on it over and over. And then it's always there. Right. How to approach some of the excitement I feel presently at the opportunity to practice like my head's on fire. How to know when to practice and when to not. Well, it depends on what you mean by practice. If you're following the full practice, the Noble Eightfold Path, then you're always practicing at all hours of the day, right? You're interacting with people. You have the ability to practice, right speech, right action. You're going about your day. All of these things, even in quarantine in a house, all of these things you can practice, right? Because you're dealing with people, and even if you're alone, maybe you're online, you're dealing with people. There's always opportunities every second of every waking moment of the day to practice some kind of aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path. And in terms of straight up meditation, you might not be sitting and closing your eyes all day, but you're practicing everything you're doing, every activity you're involved in, you're practicing vipassana, as they say today, or, satipatthana, foundations of mindfulness. You're practicing insight practices in every opportunity, everything that happens, right? So you can, and now obviously, in all honesty, the only nobody is going to be able to practice like their head's on fire 24/7, 365. Right? Nobody can be mindful 24/7, 365. Only maybe awakened beings. That's about it. Right? But we can try to do our best with it as much as we can. Try to do our best to use the time that we have as wisely and skillfully as we can. That doesn't mean that we're going to be able to do it all the time, but we can do what we can. Using that excitement, so that's like developing zeal, right? When you have that zeal to practice, that's good to practice. It's harder to practice when you don't have that zeal, right? Oh, it's 5 o'clock, I got to meditate. So it's good to kind of develop that zeal to reflect, to keep reflecting on these things, to have that zeal stay with you. Makes the practice a lot easier. But that doesn't mean that that's always going to be with you, right? You just practice and do your best. Because Jens says, because we do not have charnel grounds to visit, what do you recommend to become more familiar, to visualize the decay of the body and decomposition of the body? So read, Satipatthana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 10. Read that, and the Buddha says, The Buddha obviously in the suttas will encourage monastics to go to charnel grounds, but if you read the reflection, if you read the instructions, essentially he's giving you a visualization, because it's like it is as if a body were to be such and such. So you're actually visualizing, and so that's what I did. I kind of developed, and like that's because I've been able, watching stuff like Body Farms, and so you watch, you observe, like even if you have like an anatomy book, you kind of see it in whatever, obviously, like you said, we don't have charnel grounds, so we can't go to them, but you can, there's lots of online sources, books, whatever you can get to like visualize, to see this is what a body looks like, and then so you can kind of use that as it'll help your visualizations when your mind is, eyes are closed and you're going through those practices. So definitely Google a certain kind of death. And if you're not used to it, take it in very small doses. It's pretty brutal. It's about what happens, like the process that happens when people are found dead who are basically Jane Does, what are John Does, like people who have nobody to claim them. And it shows this. So it's interesting, like to give you an example, right? So there's this woman who's, I guess, one of the investigators. She's in there and there's this big dead body right there. And they're kind of like going to move it and they're being very gentle. And then her daughter calls. And so she's like, she has her phone like this. She's talking to her daughter about her homework and she's helping these other people carry this body. Right. And you think like, there's such a weird kind of thing that makes you, wow, that's like amazing, but that's her life, that she's used to it. She's been around it. Right. And so that's what you can do, is the more you practice, you understand, okay, this is the way it is. I don't think I've ever been around like a, outside of a hospital or morgue kind of setting. I've never been around like a dead body, but if you live out in the woods, you see corpses of animals and, open with their guts and all kinds of stuff like that as you're walking. So you get to, that helps you to kind of, see that. But again, maybe the first time you feel like you're going to throw up. If you have to, that's okay. But you eventually, the more you reflect on it, the more you get used to it, then the easier it becomes. Sally, I had lost a close friend. He died horribly due to spirits. Very likely he went to bad realms, worst case hell. So I have PTSD that linked to death of hell. How to overcome? You don't know. See, this is one of the misconceptions. Buddha is very clear, is that you don't know what your next life is. So one of the things I do to kind of shock people into this, and I say is, Hitler could be in a heaven realm right now. Right? People are like, what? The point is that there's no linearity, right? Actually, you see in the suttas that people actually misconstrue. Like some deep meditators are able to see that one person is, they're really bad in life, and then they die and they're born in a heaven realm, right? Or one person is really good in life, in this life, and they die and they go to a hell realm, right? And the people who only see kind of like half the story, they have these misunderstandings. It's like, oh, there's no your actions mean nothing, right? So the point of this is you don't know what your next life is, because you have innumerable amounts. So like everybody in their past lives have been Hitler. Everybody in their past lives have been Mother Teresa. Pick your most evil person, pick your most good person, whatever. We've all done the most horrible things in life. We've all done the best things in life. So we have innumerable amounts of lifetimes of karma built up, right? And unless we become a stream enter, unless we become a sotapanna, it's a crapshoot. We don't know what the next life is going to be, right? So when you become a stream enter, then you're guaranteed not to go into any of the realms of woe, like the hell realms, animal realms, etc. And you have 7 lives to become awakened. So you don't know. You just don't know what your next life is going to be, and so you have to kind of come to an acceptance of that. You don't know. All you can do is practice right here and right now in this very life. That's all you can do. If you practice right here and right now in this very life, you do good things and practice well and skillfully, you develop good merit, and then that will lead to good rebirth and good things in the future. There's no guarantee that it will be the next future, but so that's why we want to do our best in this wonderful auspicious human life, to do our best to practice as much as we can. That's all. This is an acceptance. There's a lot of accepting in Buddhism. There's a lot of an understanding of this is life. This is reality, and at first you don't want to accept that, but then the more you understand it, the more you see reality, the more you accept it. Greeno, Bhante J, I have a severe congenital heart defect and have mostly lived in fear of death and dying. What do you think is a healthy way to do mindfulness of death regarding that body condition? Well, you can incorporate this into all of those practices, right? You have a body, you've been born, so you're subject to these things, right? I mean, this is just, it's kind of, you have to understand that this is the way it is. Like I remember with my wife, when we had the second opinion, the doctor basically told us, like, when you were born, you had it, your genes, whatever, had this, defect, so that you were going to have this cancer, right? And then you die at 25. So it's like, this is just part of the nature of how things go, because you have this body, right? This can happen. Some people live to 90 with no problems. Some people, die when they're a year old, 2 years old, 5 years old. It's just the way it is. It's life, right? So you use that. Okay, I have this body. I have this condition. I don't know how long I have, right? So you can integrate this and understand this. Use this as a Dhamma lesson, as a tool, right, for your own development, spiritual development. It's like, in one way, you could say that you are blessed more than others, because you have this can help you understand the Dhamma and practice, have more of a urgency to practice than somebody who's always healthy. Maybe they just eat whatever they want and they do whatever they want and they're skinny and, all these kind of things. There's some people that are like that. But, you have this condition. You can't just snap your fingers and it's gone. Use it as a learning tool. Use it as part of your practice. But reflect on it, that this is something that you have, and it's not going to go away. You can do the best you can. Conditions, going to doctors and operations and things like that. But it'll run its course just like everything else. And so try to use this as a reflecting. Use it as a tool. You can use it as a tool for awakening. Vortex says, one of my teachers stated that in his Vinaya classes, it was taught that euthanasia is not killing, just presenting that viewpoint. Definitely a personal decision. Well, I will say that it's very clear in my Vinaya that it literally says, I cannot encourage anybody to commit suicide. I cannot encourage anybody to have an abortion. I cannot encourage anybody to commit any kind of euthanasia. And if I do, and they go through with it and the being is killed, then I'm not a monk anymore. So it's very clear in my Vinaya, at least, in the Theravada Vinaya, that it is actually, it's killing. And so, of course, that leads to this kind of horrible, we don't want to, because we're uncomfortable with somebody else's suffering, whether it's our dog or another person, we want to end it, right? And it's not only just necessarily for them, but it's also for us to kind of feel better, so we don't have to see the suffering. We don't have to hear and experience the suffering of the person. So it's a complicated subject, and Buddhism is a big, there's lots of different types of Buddhism, lots of different types of viewpoints. This is the way it is. Well, see, what I would say is pulling the plug. So, like, if a person is literally just living, if machines are keeping that person alive, and it's not a short-term thing, like for instance with my wife, right? She was at the end stages of cancer, and it came to the end, was which happens a lot. I've had this happen with my grandmother and other people. What happens is they get to the point where we can give them morphine and let them die, or we can intubate them. And my opinion was, well, the intubation, it's not gonna magically keep her alive. Like if you're in an accident and you need the help of the machine to keep you breathing and alive for a short period of time while you heal, that's one thing. But if it's just medicine or it's just machines keeping you alive and you're not going to come out of it, I don't see that. I don't see how that would be killing per se. You're not, that's a complicated subject. It really is. But you're not taking the life. The machines are keeping the life going. I don't know. It's a hard subject, and it's something that you have to reflect on and make your own decision. That's one of the things that I always tell people is you can't rely on a teacher, a person in robes, or a lay teacher, whatever. You can't rely on them to give you the answers to everything that you're going to have to deal with in life. You have to reflect on it. You have to use your practice and your wisdom and your intuition and reflect and make the decision that you feel is best for you, the best decision you can make at the time. That's just simply the way it is, right? Joe, we are past time here. I don't know if we're butting up on something else that Buddhist Insights is going to do. I'm okay with going a little bit longer, but otherwise we should probably move towards ending. And if anybody needs to go, then they can go. Don't feel like you have to stay. How might one hold both death meditation and a tendency to suicidal ideation? That's another tough one. That's another tough one. In a situation like that, I would say that, you would, if you were to use some kind of mindfulness of death practices, it should be done within monitoring. Like if you have like a therapist or somebody who is co-qualified in therapeutic services, but also mindfulness stress reduction, or so something like that. You would need some kind of help and monitoring for that. That's it's a tough question. It's a tough question. I would say if you do it very, if you go into it, do it very minimally, and if you are able to, if you're a meditator, if you're observing, the Buddha will say, if you're doing a practice, if it's leading to your harm, then it's probably not something that you should be doing, or maybe you need to do it differently or back up from it for now, right? So you have to kind of understand, like, is this increasing my suicidal ideation or is it lessening, right? But I would suggest, doing this, if you do this, any kind of meditation, actually, with something like suicidal ideation, is that you have some kind of a support system, right? You have some kind of professional therapeutic services, interventions to help you, so that it doesn't, have any negative effects. All right. So it looks like I'm at the end. Um, Let me see. All right. Yeah. So I think that I just see some comments, but no questions. So, all right, friends. Um, Thank you very much for coming and practicing Dhamma. And I hope that you've developed some benefit from this, and practice well. Practice like your head's on fire, right? All right, friends. I'll see you tomorrow morning, same time, for the next, which is a similar topic. At least it bucks into it, which is living with uncertainty. Until next time, friends.